my point of view. When I, 1952, I graduated from South High School in Salt Lake City, Utah. And at that particular time, the Korean War was kind of coming down to an end. It had been on full time for a while, but it was still very much in our lives. I was looking forward to trying to maybe go to college at the time, and I was going to go to BYU that following semester. But there were three things facing all of us at that time. When you graduated from high school, you were facing the draft. And there were 2 or 3 ways to avoid the draft. One of them was to go to college and be a full-time college student. Another is to get married and have the responsibilities of the home. And the third is to join some other organization that would be considered worthy, like the Peace Corps or something that they may have to volunteer for. And when I graduated myself, I had a friend, Claire Syndergaard, graduated at the same time, and I had intended to go to BYU the following semester, or in the winter semester actually. Found out that financially I could do it, but I realized that it was going to be a strain to be able to pay for the college time and be able to follow that up. I'd have to work, of course, so that would be natural, but it still would be hard time financing it. So in order to avoid the drafts, literally, my friend Claire came to me and he said, you don't want to join the Army? And I said, no, I really don't. And he agreed with me and he said, how about we go down and investigate the opportunities down at the Air National Guard, see if that, because I'd like to learn about airplanes and that might be kind of exciting. So he convinced me we should. We went down to the Salt Lake Airport, reported in with the National Guard, talked to an interviewer. He spent a big part of the day with us, told us how great it was going to be, and they had all these new jets and new aircraft. And it was exciting for a person in my situation and my friend. We both really liked what we heard, but he made it sound so good that we kind of hesitated a little bit, because we kind of felt like we were being, he was exaggerating the good parts and not talking about the poor parts. Well, we decided we would think about it, and as we were walking away from the Air Guard, we were crossing the rampway there at Salt Lake Airport, and there were 3 SNJs sitting there outside of Quonset hut with the U.S. Navy markings on them. And so we caught our attention, and we were just walking on the ramp and walked over to them, and we were admiring the aircraft and looking up and talking to each other about it. When lo and behold, the commanding officer of the air unit to which these airplanes belonged, it was called Air Unit 714, and he came out and put his arms around our shoulders and said, pretty neat aircraft, huh? And we asked him about them, and he was telling us about them. And he says, how'd you like to go for a ride? There were 3 pilots got in the 3 aircraft. I got in one, and my friend got in one of the others. So there had 2 of them with the riders alongside. We took off. We were very excited about, first he took us in to put a parachute on us, which was kind of big and bulky, and didn't really realize how bulky they were until he slapped this thing on us, put us into the back seat, gave us a kind of a quick tour, and said, this button is this, and here's the mic, and here's how you key it, and here's how you reply to the guy in front, and etc. And I was quite shy of the radio. I felt like I was going to goof things up a little bit, but Anyway, made us feel comfortable. Got in the aircraft. We took off, and the guy said, we're going to go out over Great Salt Lake, and we're going to do some maneuvers, like do a little dog fighting, and we'll have kind of a kick doing it. I said, that's great. So I was told, here's what you do. You keep your eye open in the back of you. He says somebody will probably try to dive down on us. One of the other aircraft will try to dive down on us and get us from surprise. And if there's the sun is still in the sky, it is, and they'll come out of the sun so where you can't see them. So you have to keep your eye on them, and then keep me informed of where you see them. At 10 o'clock, at 12 o'clock, and so forth. And I've seen this kind of thing in movies and so forth, and thought, well, okay, I'll get that figured out. And we got out over Great Salt Lake, and lo and behold, out of the top of us there came an aircraft, and down he was diving on us. I managed to pick it up, and I was kind of concerned that I was going to give the right kind of instructions on front. But I told him there, guy coming from, I don't know, 5 o'clock above us, coming down on us. And so we started maneuvering, and we were maneuvering, and he was zigging and zagging. We would dive, we would make sharp turns, we would, it was pretty exciting, actually. And of course the stomach was taking with us. But we held our own. I didn't bother me as much as I thought it did. It was like a big E ride at Disneyland, and that was a humdoozy. But aircraft then would swoop by us, and we'd go back and chase one of them down and swoop by them and try to get on their tail, and they'd try to get our tail, and the three of them would be maneuvering around. It was a great time we had. It was something super. And anyway, when we finally spent that afternoon, it seemed like it was probably an hour and a half or so, at least. I think it might have been a little more than that. Then we came back to the base and landed, and we thought, boy, that was super fun. The commanding officer came out to greet us and say, how'd everything go? And we had to return the parachutes, of course, take the gear back off. He said, how'd you like to join up with us? And without hesitating. I don't know why. We didn't even think twice about it. With the Air Guard, we really kind of fought it and thought about it and said we'll think about it. But with this guy, we had so much fun that day, we just said, give us the paper, we'll sign it. And we signed up for 8 years in the U.S. Navy Reserve without even giving it any consideration. Of those 8 years, you had to serve at least 2 years of continuous active duty. And then the other 6 years would be as an active reservist. That is, that you could be called into the Navy and serve at any time and be called on active duty. So you were really obligating yourself for an 8-year period. 2 definitely, and the other 6 maybe. We signed, and we got hooked onto it. And the next thing we know was they said, well, there's a school coming up in the summer. It's a boot camp, and it's over in Oakland, California. And we can send the 2 of you over there to boot camp. And you can get, you're coming in as an airman and apprentice, or an airman, an AA, I guess it is. And we'll give you the schooling, and you can be a full airman by the time it takes a year for you to get to that point. But he says, here's a good chance to go to school and learn about the Navy. So I did go to college for a semester, found out what was actually true was true. I didn't have enough money to finish that year out. A lot of adventures there. I decided this thing with the reserve was the thing to do. We went to school, both of us signed up, went to boot camp the following summer, and spent 89 days at the boot camp. Now it was 89 days because 90 days was considered serving your active duty. And if they had put us there for 90 days, then we wouldn't have the obligation of following up. So we learned the lesson there a little bit. But at the end of the 89 days, they gave us about 3 days off, and then they sent us to another school in Los Alamitos, California, for aviation electronics technician. And we went to another 89-day school. So actually we had been 180 days of active duty without getting credit for it, is what it really amounted to. But anyway, we went, and it was exciting, and we did learn, and I learned aviation, I learned electronics, and they did teach a good school there. And we got to be in California for the first time a bit. And together we did what we had to do, come back, and then we were going to serve our time working and going to weekend meetings in two weeks a year and 1 weekend every month, and do our other jobs normally, which is what occurred. We came back and kind of went our separate ways at that point. We were getting different jobs. My friend went to a job in in Colorado and to a mining job, and I found another job locally, and we worked for a while. And eventually it came time where the Korean War was going to be declared officially over, and it had to be at the end of January, about 1953, if I'm not, no, 1954 probably, if I'm thinking of this thing correctly. And if we went in while the Korean War was still on, we would benefit by having GI Bill rights. And I didn't know really what that meant to us at the time, but it sounded good, and figured it's something I don't have now, and we'll get it then. So we did. We decided, I ended up deciding to go and join and go on active duty in 1955, January 1955. That's where it finally ended. I'm sorry, I said the wrong year before, but 1955. And I went to Treasure Island. I got on a bus, went to Treasure Island. At Treasure Island, they gave us, we did sign up on the 29th, I think, January, as I remember right, so I technically was a Korean War veteran of 2 days. And that qualified me for the GI Bill. And then they pulled assignments from there. And I was assigned to a VP squadron, a heavier than air patrol squadron, and a PV2, PM2 seaplane. I again didn't know what all that meant, but I had a rating then of a third-class petty officer, so that was a pretty good deal. So I went in on active duty, and they were immediately scheduled to go to Japan and serve the time in Japan. We were stationed at Iwakuni, Japan. We did a hop over, a fly out of California, went to Hawaii, spent a month in Hawaii, which was exciting to me again. That was really neat. Some great adventures happened there. An example, I guess, is a bunch of the guys who were going to be there while we qualified did maneuvers and so forth in the aircraft for about a month. And so some of the guys rented a car, and the car they normally rent was a big old Cadillac convertible, but on my salary at third class petty officer, all there certainly couldn't do that. So I went out and bought an automobile for $35 with the idea that if I could still drive, with an agreement on the used car dealer, that if I could drive the car back to him in one piece and under its own power, he'd give me $35 back on it at the end of the month. And that way I got it rented for nothing. And he agreed to it. And so I have lots of exciting stories about that car and being in Hawaii and driving over the valley. And actually I met more people because they all wanted to ride in the old car rather than the big new fancy ones. So we had a real experience in Hawaii. We went on to Iwakuni, Japan, where we patrolled. We would climb in our seaplanes, and we would then go out and fly the Sea of Japan up north towards up the coast of Korea and up towards Russia, and fly back down, and we would take pictures of, we'd do anti-submarine warfare. We would also take radar fixes against secret radar. We would dive down and, as I say, take photographs of the shipping that the Russians were doing from Port Arthur to Vladivostok. They would send their steam out. There was the entering into the Cold War. And so we would be maneuvers they didn't like. They would send smoke rings around their ships trying to avoid us. We would take pictures of the cargo. I remember we got one very good shot of a big freighter, Russian freighter, hauling a whole bunch of new Dodge automobiles. I never did figure out what that was about, but we would do things like that and fly that Sea of Japan, and they would be long flights. Sometimes kind of boring because when there wasn't anything happening, and then when you found a ship, then it was very exciting because you'd be looking for the cameras and taking the pictures and diving onto the ships or diving by them so you get good shots of these things. And that would be the routine for quite some time. And then we got to visit Japan and actually see the country there. On one particular occasion, we were out flying in the seaplane. We were flying north. I had a new lieutenant was assigned to the aircraft, and he was a navigator on the aircraft. I was an radar operator on the aircraft. The commanding officer was an old World War II, old in my eyes at least, World War II pilot lawyer. He was a lawyer, but he was pulled back in for active duty, involuntarily, by the way. So he was a little bit of a curmudgeon, but nevertheless, he was our captain. And we would be doing flights up the coast of Korea, taking radar shots when we had to. And most of the time, my radar would lay quiet. We would do more submarine hunting than anything else. And my radar would lay quiet because it had top secret frequencies, and well, they were playing war games all the time, so we didn't know whether they were really war games or real things. But at any rate, on this one occasion, the navigator, we'd been flying some time, came over to me while I was manning the radar station, and he pointed out, he said, come here, I said, I want to show you something there. Really interesting. There's an island out here, and it isn't on the map. And I'm kind of nudging and kidding with him a little bit and walking around with him, taking a look at it. Sure enough, there's an island out there, but he swears, he says, but we're right here, and there is no island on this map. So I think we just discovered a new island. And I joked with him and said, I doubt that very much, because this Sea of Japan's been navigated for a long time. Unless that's a volcano, like you say, it'd be pretty exciting all right now. And then it kind of, as we talked about it, we decided, maybe we better check into this. So we didn't know whether to bring the subject up to the captain or not. And meanwhile, he said, well, let's do a radar swipe and get a coastline reading on your scope and make sure of what we've got here. And I was told to I had to keep it to an absolute minimum. Actually, I wasn't even supposed to turn it on, but I turned it on enough to make a swipe to the left and a swipe to the right, and then turn it back off. And the screen was phosphorus, so it would burn that coastline in there, so it would stay on the scope long enough to figure out where we were. And as it turns out, lo and behold, what we were starting to suspect is we were lost. We were not where we were planning, where we were supposed to be. When we looked at it, we realized that the coastline we were looking at was the coastline of Vladivostok at 12 o'clock on our nose. We were flying towards downtown Vladivostok, and we were getting within the range of the Russians, and decided that was not a good idea. We decided we better tell the captain about it and get ourselves out of there in a big hurry. But before we made it to the captain, on the radar scope, there were spotted 3 bogeys on the left swipe, and then on the right swipe, the same 3 bogeys, but they were down the screen a lot closer to us in that one swipe. So we concluded, yeah, they were aircraft that were coming after us. So we decided we better report them. But before we got them reported, 3 MiGs had arrived, and they had done a pass on our aircraft from the side and went across the windshield area of our pilot, zooming at pretty high speeds and scaring the holy heck out of everybody. And they just did a swoop, swoop, swoop with 3 aircraft in a row and filled the windshield with their airplane. Captain sort of said, what was that? But he used some very colorful language in saying that. We told him what we had found out, that we are heading toward Vladivostok. Those were the MiGs were sent out to intercept us apparently, and had been on it for a little bit. He then did a lot of maneuvering. We dodged the airplane down. Now our airplane is capable of 250 miles an hour, and the MiGs are capable of well over 500, so you can see what kind of stance we were in. But he dove it down, take it across down to the nearest ocean as possible so they could avoid the MiGs. But in this process of doing that, our ordnanceman got very anxious when he found out what was going on, that we had some MiGs that were making pursuit curves at us. So he decided he's going to go back and man his gun, which we had a tail gun on that aircraft. And it was live. And as on he was going back, and I can remember the words. He said, "I'm going to get me a MiG." And one of the other gentlemen, one of the other crew members, managed to grab hold of this, chase him down and tackle him about 3/4 of the way to the gun, and stop him from doing anything foolish. And we did the dive. We kind of put our tails behind us and went for home as fast as we could get there. Avoided the Russian people, the pilots. I think had mercy on us. I think they probably were in rights of firing on us because I believe we were in the air limits. Had that happened, I don't think it would ever be an incident, ever been reported, and I wouldn't be here telling you the story. But at any rate, that did occur. Those are the kind of adventures we would have. We did that for about a year, flying out of Iwakuni, Japan, flying those kinds of flights. When that was over at Iwakuni, I came back to the United States. I had met my bride-to-be by that time, before that, when I was here the year earlier, and I was very anxious to be back to the States. Bought an automobile, was going to be in Alameda, and figured I could drive in from Alameda to Salt Lake and back if I needed to, and everything was getting pretty rosy then. But when I got back one of the newer crew members in the patrol squadron who had just joined us was assigned to USS Lexington, which was deploying again immediately. Now, due to an incident that, well, how can I say this incident? Let's see. I was not in favor with my commanding officer, with my captain of the aircraft. On one occasion where we'd been flying 11, 12-hour day, we came back, and when we landed, another aircraft, a different aircraft crew, was due to go out again. And we got back just in time to beat that before that aircraft took off. That second aircraft was lacking a crew member. The crew member, I think, was partying the night before and he's had a hangover is what it amounted to. My commanding officer then told me, turn around and get on that airplane and go fly with them and take his place so he won't get in trouble, the guy that was partying. And I resented it because I knew it was a voluntary thing on his part. He knew better and so forth. Anyway, I had told him that I really didn't want to do that, and I guess I don't know how it said. Words were mixed. At any rate, I ended up flying it as I was supposed to. It was a very long couple days for me and come back down. And because I may have said something I shouldn't have to our captain, I was never entirely in favor with him. So when we got back to Alameda in the States, and this other gentleman was supposed to be assigned to the ship, the Lexington, I was volunteered. Somehow or other, I found my name in his place. So that when we came back onto the Alameda, next thing I know, I was being ordered to go fill in the shoes of this married person because I was single and I could afford to go over there where it would be a hardship on him. I didn't know who he was, but anyway, it didn't matter. And so I ended up being reassigned to the Lexington and then spent another year on tour with the USS Lexington as it went back to Japan again and overseas doing patrol work, patrolling the seas there for submarines and doing anti-submarine work. Ended up going back to on the Lexington. It was a very exciting trip. We had one incident where one pilot was killed. He had a tail hook break on him, and he'd gone over the side. Didn't have enough power to go around. Went over the side. It was in a heavy waters, and he pancaked the aircraft. I was up on the bridge observing because I again was interested in the aircraft, and he attempted to get out of his airplane. They were waiting for him to catapult out of the cockpit. The man was trying to manually open it, and it wouldn't, and it was unsuccessful in getting it manually opened. And again, they were waiting for him, but I don't know if physical exhaustion got to him or what happened. But he never got out, and he went down with the aircraft. That was, now backtracking again, about a year before that, I had put in for pilot school to go to Pensacola. I had wanted to be a pilot in the Navy, and all at once, by the time I got back on the Lexington, all the paperwork had been in shuffle all the time I was in the patrol squadron. Now I'm on the aircraft carrier, and I'm watching it and the workings of the carrier and how it's done, and deciding that really I don't think I had the reflexes that were necessary to be a pilot on an aircraft carrier. And I gave it a lot of thought, but the orders finally caught up to me as we were sailing back over there again. And I ended up, the option was I could go to Pensacola if I signed up for another 6 years active duty. And I wasn't in the position where I wanted to go back to go to school. So anyway, that came and went.